So who are you and the values that can guide you? I can tell you that vision matters. What do I mean by vision? Not that you can see 2020 in a chart. Who influences, mentors, and inspires you? Now, Rick mentioned Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King inspired many of us, and indeed Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy. These were political leaders who inspired us. Well, that's one area of inspiration. But then there are people who help us to see the world in a different way as it relates to work. And those people may be authors, or those people may be people that we encounter personally, who are bosses or are people who are in the world of work, who may show us some direction that we can consider, and so we take in what they have to say and it affects us. Many of you are familiar, I think it's Sheryl Sandberg, the one that wrote the book Lean In, right, for women, from Facebook. That's somebody who is writing on behalf of all women to kind of say, hey, you need to do certain things in the workplace. That's somebody that could inspire and mentor you who you may never meet. So we can start to become who we aspire to be. We can start to become who we aspire to be if we allow for others who we respect or that we are inspired by to help us to understand the world and where we should be going. In other words, you're not an isolated individual. Who you choose to be inspired by is going to have a great effect on your life, and I don't just mean a religious leader. I mean the people that are going to inspire you in terms of how you're going to approach your own life and your own work. Now, understand that we're not just talking about content, like getting 3 bullet points and that's what you're learning. We're talking about how you think, feel, and behave, and that's affected by externals. And there's a lot of research on this. We are affected by the people that we are around. We're around happy people, we tend to be happy. If we're around envious people, we will be envious. If we're around people who are destructive, it will affect us. Now, Rick and I may be the last generation that is a print-oriented generation. Marshall McLuhan, who was one of our early inspirers, used the term the Gutenberg galaxy, right? Gutenberg invented the printing press. We lived in the galaxy of the words, right? We were inspired by writers. We read McLuhan, who talked to us about how to think about media and how we are affected by media. And that got us into communications, by the way. We were very inspired to get into the communications field because we wanted to know how people, we wanted meaning and how do people respond to each other. It was very close to psychology, and we were inspired by McLuhan and by others. It may be that we are inspired by writers. With Rick, it was Hermann Hesse, and that got us into Eastern thought. It could be John Steinbeck, who had the allure of California. In other words, people that we read inspired us when we were young. It could be music, and the way we saw young men, the way they saw women, were inspired by listening to Joni Mitchell or Judy Collins or Joan Baez. So it doesn't have to be just who you read, it can be who you listen to. Who do you allow to become part of your psychological furniture? How do you arrange the way you experience the world? You can be conscious of it. So the first thing I want you to understand, if you would, that you can consciously choose who you're inspired by. You can consciously choose who you're mentored by. You can consciously choose who your friends are going to be, in understanding that they will have a great effect on who you will become. Does that make sense? And that may mean that you make changes through your life because you'll be inspired and you'll be hopefully working with different people who will bring you up and not bring you down. I had the privilege of having a very tough but fair boss in New York when I worked in the advertising industry, somebody named Gene DeWitt, who reached the very highest pinnacles of the media business in New York, and I was one of his, if you want to call it, disciples. I worked for him. He created a bar that created excellence that I aspired to, and it brought my level of work way up because I wanted to be acknowledged and recognized by that kind of individual. And so I'll give you one piece of advice here. Please choose people who will give you a higher bar, not a bar that just doing okay is all right, because you'll never get better. Okay? It's kind of like if you all got A's without doing any work, you probably wouldn't learn very much. So you want to be sure that you are inspired and you're working with people who set a higher bar. So there are certain values that I'm going to show you. Daniel Pink is the person who came up with several of these, if you're interested in following up. But in your generation, there's a different set of values than in our generation. And what we've learned is some of these values may be more important to you than others. But the first is autonomy. If we had a lot of time, we would discuss this together. But I'd like you to think about what is autonomy. It is your own personal agency to make choices about where you're going to work. Maybe you want to pick up and work in Paris for a year. Maybe you want to work from home. Maybe as you get married and you have a child, you want to work from home and be able to take care of your child. Maybe you're going to want to work very hard for a few years and then work less hard for several other years because you're going to have other experiences. And being able to be more in control of your own work structures enable you to have autonomy. So think of autonomy as having a direct agency in your life and making those choices. There is no reason today, in 2015, that 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, is the norm for what you should be working. That was generated 70 years ago in a completely different economy. You are not in that economy. So even how you think about your autonomy, being able to be a freelance sometimes, being able to be a manager, taking more responsibility, working within a corporation perhaps, working outside as a teacher perhaps, maybe taking a job where you get summers off, maybe taking a job where you travel a little bit, and that you get to experience different things will be part of your decisions about your autonomy. You are not locked in to a 40-hour week, 50 weeks a year, going to an office so that everybody sees you working there. That assumption is now an incorrect assumption, certainly for your generation. Secondly, and this is very important, you need to have a mastery of something. In other words, it's what my son calls traction. You have to have traction. You have to have something, whether it's you know how to make an app, you know how to run meetings very well, so you're a good project manager, you're a good marketer, you understand how to read contracts, you might be a paralegal, you might be in the nonprofit world and you have mastery of how to get a grant. I'm talking very practical, what can you do? Not that you got a degree at San Francisco State, you read a lot of you wrote a lot of papers, you got a lot of grades, and I've accomplished getting a degree, because that is meaningless unless you can translate that in what can you do. So mastery is what can you do, and that's going to change over time and become more and more important. What are you a master of? By master, I don't mean you're the best. I mean you're competent. Okay? Competency is your goal. And you can master a lot of things, but you have to understand that you have to have something that is clear, that is recognized by the marketplace as valid, and that enables you to say, I'm competent to do these kinds of things because I've had those experiences. You may not have it yet, but it's something that you can work toward getting. Because if you have mastery, you will have autonomy, because you'll be able to be in projects, you'll be able to have a lot more control of your own life if you have that mastery. The other thing that people your age are concerned about is purpose. Now, not everybody has to cure cancer. We're not talking about that kind of purpose, although it's, or global warming, that's a good objective. But why are you doing what you're doing? Is it meaningful? And being meaningful can be that you're serving a group of people that you care about, and that is meaningful, and thereby you glean purpose no matter what your job is. And that's going to be important because only you can talk about what's purpose and meaning for you. Because what's meaningful for me is not what's meaningful for you. And you have to be able to determine that for yourself. Again, you may not know that yet. But it's something you want to work toward. Progress. You want to see that the work that you're doing, that something is actually happening, and that you're able to progress, both in your skill sets and in that something has happened as a result of your work. Clearly, people who are physical therapists get a great deal of satisfaction when they see somebody who has great physical disability get to a place where they have mobility, and just getting somebody to the place where they can walk is very, very purposeful for somebody who is a physical therapist. You may find other things are purposeful for you. And the last is sharing, which sounds kind of weird. But sharing is because you're all on the internet, you have your network, your social networks, you want others to see what you're doing, and you want to see what others are doing, and in your way of working, you want to work in an open source environment, open resource environment where people are cooperative, collaborative, and not vertical in proprietary information. Believe me, this is a revolution in terms of the expectations of work that your generation has relative to the structure of work as we've always known it. Because everything that I just put on here that you would say, well, yeah, of course that's true. It's not set up for you in the world of work that this is going to be delivered to you. You're going to have to seek it out. And you're going to have to define it for yourself. Does this make sense? Okay. So, if we have these as kind of checklists, how am I doing in terms of my values? Which of these are more important? And by the way, certain times in your life, some of them may be more important than other times in your life. It starts to create some clarity of where am I going before I even talk about which industry, which job, which function, my day-to-day work. This is a very good way for you to see that you will at least not be unhappy and be in the wrong situation for yourself. Okay? So this is a checklist of values for you. So here's a major point. So if you've fallen asleep, please wake up because this is now important. Your goal is called self-efficacy. Your goal is called self-efficacy, to make things happen for you. To make it happen for you means you're not waiting for somebody to give it to you, you're not waiting for somebody to hire you for it, and you are going to have to make things happen against odds, against handicaps, against frustration, against turndowns, against being in a rotten job with a rotten boss and saying, I'm out of here, I don't know where I'm going, but that doesn't match what this is, and I'm going to make something happen for myself. By the way, the fact that we have internet and we have technology enables you to do that much more easily than it was ever possible for us. We couldn't just walk away from things quite as easily as you can. But it's not a matter of walking away from, it's a matter of positively creating for you. And so I'm going to give you a mantra to think about that fulfills what I just said. And it's probably the thing that I've used more than anything else is my North Star. Take calculated risks for your own happiness. Take calculated risks for your own happiness. And there are 3 categories when you're going to be choosing, and you're going to make lots of choices, whether it's who you marry, whether it's where you work, which city you're going to go to, which industry you're going to work in, which community you're going to live in, which friends you're going to have, or society you're going to be in. There are things that are easy, there are things that are likely, and there are things that are attainable. It would have been easy for me to stay in New York City. It would have been likely, after I got my master's degree, that I would go on for a PhD and teach. But it was attainable for me to leave New York City and to come to California to make my life here Never regretted it a single day. It was hard to do, but it was attainable. I never regretted not going what was likely in terms of the course that Rick took, which was right for him, but might not have been right for me. And I went into advertising and then knew when it was time to leave, and it was attainable for me to do other things rather than it being likely that I just stayed in the same industry and did the same job over and over again. So I'm using my own personal experience as a marker for you that you will find yourself feeling trapped sometimes or feeling uneasy about choices. Make the decision that you're going to take calculated risks for your own happiness, and then look at what's attainable, and then look at the skill sets you might need in order to make yourself more marketable in order to get that, and work towards something that's going to work for you. So this is really important, because if you don't do that and you're rudderless, you're going to be like a boat that's going around in the stream of the ocean, and you're not going to be able to direct your own life and direct your own career, and you're not going to be happy. So that's about you, and how do you really do this self-reflection. So it's not that hard, but you have to be focused.